Greg Sullivan here is ready to go. He is working on a project called the Short Project that you can check out at shortproject.com. It's a collaborative Lightwave short film being produced. But right now he's going to show some cool animation techniques in Lightwave. So take it away, Greg.
Hi everybody. First thing we want to do is create a box. 0.5 feet, 6 inches. Put it right in the zero. We just want one segment. And then what we want to do is, that's just a normal box. So we want it to be much, much, much longer and with a lot more subdivisions. I'm going to bring up my numeric panel here. You can interact in the scene, just draw a box, stretch it out, do whatever you want with it, but I want to be a little more precise for our purposes. So I'm going to make the width, let's make the depth 40 feet. Nice and crazy long. And let's make it 80 divisions on Z. So we've got a little sub patch here every 6 inches. Go to one end here, one end or the other. I'm going to pick this end here and just delete that polygon and subdivide the whole thing. Why did I delete that polygon? When that polygon's gone, we get hard edges on this end. And when we pop over to the other end, because we still have that polygon, it curves around the edge and we get a nice, rounded edge, don't we? So we get the whole thing, and we want it to rotate around. Let me look at this from the top here, down here in this lower right-hand area. I'm going to move this back so that the head of our scrolly dealy is at roughly 0, 0, 0. Did I just do that? Yes, I did. Good. Scoot that back a little bit here. Now, the next step is to add a weight map, because we're going to be using a tool called lag. Lag says which percentage of time, in the time that you give it, say 5 seconds, do I lag this point behind where it would be if it was a hard body? And so I'm going to put 5 seconds, and then I want the tail all the way down here at the bottom to lag behind the full 5 seconds, and up here at the head I want no lag at all. I want it to do what I say, the frame I tell it to do it. And so how do we tell this point to move and this point not to? We do that with a weight map, which is one of, I believe, Lightwave's unique features. It's a very cool way to define gradients on a mesh without having to create a map. So we're just going to go to Map, go down here to Weights, New, let's call this Lag. And then, now I was getting a little ahead of myself and ended up not setting that to 0. So when I created the weight map, it created everything at 100%. So I'm just going to clear that and go over here to Weights. In for numeric, let's create a linear fall off. And make that corner full view there. And just drag this out. And there you go. Pointy end, 0, big end, 100%, or whichever value I put here. So I'm going to put 100%, apply that value. When we go back to our weight view, you can see on the trailing edge it's 100% lag, 0% lag at the front here. It's represented by green and red. So I'm going to save this object before I get too much further ahead of myself. Call it streamer. I'm going to call it _V001. Lightwave will recognize the V001, and if I hit Shift S, it'll save a revision and bring that serial up one click. That way you can, you never screw yourself when you made one more change than you meant to, or one more change than there are undo levels. You can always go back a previous revision. So, streamer V001. This next bit is a little interesting because it's something that you got to discover by doing this. What's going to happen is the points will be lagged in time from where they are. So if we have the streamer already stretched out and then we move it, it's going to lag more, and the inertial points are going to be all at the front. It's going to behave oddly. So we take all the polygons except the one at the very front, and we squish them right here into one point in space. Save that and send it over to layout. Let me check one thing here. Yeah, somehow along the line I accidentally flipped my polygons. There we go. Send that, I just hit F, that's all I did. Whoops. Send that over to layout. Okay. Metric. I hate you, metric. Pull our camera back so we can see our object. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to create a null object. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a minute. I'm going to call this root. I'm going to create another null object. Auto key is off apparently. Call this spinner. It will all make sense in just a moment. Turning auto key on. A lot of people like to work so that they set everything up and then create their key manually by hitting enter and defining whether you create a key for motion or rotation or scale. I like to work in auto key where it will record for you automatically every little tweak and twist. So let me move my camera back out here. Now we're going to parent our object spinner to our object root. These names don't mean anything. It's just arbitrary. It makes sense for me to keep track of it. You can call it whatever you want to. So spinner will be parented to root, and streamer will be parented to spinner. So we've got, you can see the hierarchy right there. Root, spinner. I'm pointing at this screen like you can see my hand. You can see root underneath spinner, underneath streamer. Or swap that, reverse it. So now let's take root and do some animation. Let's just move it across the scene in 60 frames and give it a little bit of back and forth motion. Frame 20, frame 40. Give it a little groove. Let's go to the graph editor, and I want that motion. Right now at 0, it's staying still, and then at frame 1 it starts moving, and at 60 it stops. I want it to have gone, at frame 0 I want it to have been coming from somewhere, because when our streamer is trailing this, if at 0 the streamer is trailing and we haven't moved in the previous frame, the streamer won't be trailing anything because there was no motion. So we want to go back in time and create motion. You can see here in the motion curves that they all come to a dead stop right there at 0. So I'm going to set the pre-behavior to linear. And you can see now that the curves shoot off infinity back in the direction. Let's do the same with the post behavior. So now we're going, and now hit the motion options. Let's align this to path. I want the streamer to face the path as it goes. So I'm going to align the heading to the path and the pitch, not the bank. I don't like aligning the bank. I'd rather animate that manually. Now we're going to go to the spinner. This is one of those things where you do a bunch of setup and then it gets really cool all of a sudden. You're like, whoa! So at frame, let's call it 15, let's rotate the spinner on its bank axis 360 degrees. Not 3,500. There we go. Go to the graph editor. Do the same thing with the rotation that you did with the previous, and set those to linear. Linear. That means at all times the spinner will be rotating constantly. Now go back to frame 0. Take your streamer. This is where things start getting interesting, and offset it. Now streamer's parented to spinner, so you can see what's happening. We get the spinner is spinning independently of the motion of the root. And I set the rotation in the spinning null instead of the root null, so that if I ever want to rotate the root null, I don't screw up my constant spinning motion. And so this is too far off the axis for me. Let's make sure the motion's doing what we want it to do. That's pretty cool. Now, that's the motion we want from the geometry, except for the dynamic trailing, which we're going to use the lag tool to create. So we're going to go into deformation. First of all, let me set this to last. That's the subdivision order. You can subdivide at any point along the process. I want it last. I want all that geometry to be generated after we've lagged the points. Go to deformation. And there's the inertia plugin. Double click to get into its properties. Set the inertial pivot object, leave that all alone. Set the weight map to the lag. Remember we created that in Modeler just a few moments ago. And set the lag rate to, I'm going to start with just 5. Oh, that's looking cool already. Well, hello, nurse. Suddenly we have a very cool, very slick little thing. And look, notice how fast that's happening. It's in real time. If I go back to my root and I change it, put this here, or maybe I want more crazy rotation. So what if I go to my spinner, like I just accidentally did for 2 frames? Haha, you didn't see that. I'm going to delete the motion keys, but not the rotation keys. There we go, root. Move this down. I hosed up my spinner even though I was going to be very careful not to do that in front of an audience of people. Look at all that really cool dynamic motion you're getting. You can see it's a little faceted. That's because I have the subdivision level only set to 3. That means we have those 40 subdivided lengths that we set up in Modeler being subdivided 3 times, and it's 3 times 4 times, or whatever the math is. It's a lot of polygons, but not enough. So we select the streamer, and we can set the subdivision order up to more. It's up to 5. But we don't want to take it too high. We just still want to be able to see what we're doing in OpenGL here. We can set the render geometry independently of the display. We can see 3, it'll render 5, or we can see 3, it'll render 2500. So I'm going to set this to, there we go. And go to Deformation, bring this up, and we can change the lag to be way more, way less, whatever we want to do. Don't make it too long without going back to the model or adding more subdivisions, or as you get toward the tail, like we did in our animation here, you'll start to get these unfortunate, there we go. You'll start to get these, look toward the end of the tail back here, you'll get that kind of, see that shudder? So that's because I overextended the geometry. That's pilot error. It's a simple fix. Add more subdivisions in your model. It's very easy. You could even just subdivide your model back in Modeler, and you'll be taken care of. Now, one of the cool things about this animation you'll see, at least in my humble opinion, is this really cool kind of streaky lighting effect. It's got these glows and this really poppy, high-rent looking kind of thing. A little American Idol-ish. I don't know why the person singing at the top of American Idol is being surrounded by violent streamers of light, but it's what we're trying to do here. So let's jump into surfacing this bad boy. There's only one object in the scene, so I didn't bother to give it its own surface name. So by default, we're working with something called glass. Well, that's odd. I must have copied that on accident from another object while I was opening a scene. Streamer 1, we'll call it. It's supposed to be default, whatever. Let's turn on smoothing. That gets rid of most of that faceting I was talking about. And let's turn on, let's go to the colors. You can do this in the node editor, but the node editor is, it's very powerful, and this is kind of an introductory lesson. So we're going to start with Lightwave fundamental surfacing. And let's add a gradient. And we're going to use this gradient as incidence angle, which means we can define what the color will be when the beam from the camera hits the camera at 0 degrees and at 90 degrees. So it's going to be orange here and blue here and gradient between that. So let's do that right now. We've put this at 90 degrees. And let's just go up here. One quick second here. It's hard enough doing animation in front of a crowd of people when the system's not set up to your preferences. So where do you change it to the Lightwave color editor? I don't change this very often. General color picker, Lightwave. Lightwave's color picker is cooler than Windows color picker, so I prefer to use it. There we go. Go over here to the light temperatures. Kelvin is one of the ways you set your light temperatures. You can actually match it to the temperature of a real world light when you're matching a lighting situation. So I'm just going to pick a nice bright orange. Go up here, pick a nice cool blue. And you can see what's happening here in our little, again, I'm pointing at this display. You can see what's happening here in our little sphere. It's orange in the center, blue on the edges. And let's make this really bright. And let's make this really not diffuse. And let's render this. That's, see the gradient here on all the, we're starting to get what we're looking for. Let's add some more. Let's get complicated. Add some more nodes in here. Let's make this one black. And put a black one here. And then put a nice bright blue here. I'm completely flying by the seat of my pants. I'm just looking over here at the sphere and saying, I like this, I don't like that. It's very iterative. If you had a specific drawing you were going off of, reproducing it's very easy. But this process is a lot of fun. So that's how I do it this way. Now let's put a little anti-aliasing on that camera. I'm going to use the new perspective camera. Get the nice anti-aliasing here. There we go. That's starting to get very interesting. One of the things I don't like about this is you'll see as it trails to the end, it doesn't taper the opacity away like it did in the one I showed you when we started. And that's because we haven't done that yet. So let's do that. Let's go to the surface editor, go to transparency, And this is where we start recycling things. In Lightwave, we define that gradient to define how we lag things. That gradient has nothing to do with the lag tool. It's just an input value. We can use it for surfacing as well, and that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm actually going to make this into a gradient. I'm going to take the, let's do a weight map input. Let's choose lag. Weight maps can go from negative 100% to 100%. I believe theoretically you can go well past on either end if you need that kind of information, but I don't. I didn't even use the negative, so I'm going to set a key here at 0 and a key here at 100. At the lag value of 100%, we also want it to be 100% transparent. So let's set the value to 100. Already is 100. So at 0, we want it to be 0. And just to avoid confusing matters, we'll set it to 0 at negative 100. Now, assuming that my tired brain has not swapped these values on accident, this should do what I wanted it to do. Oh, frabjous day, it worked. See? That's starting to look very complicated, very, very cool, and very, very quickly. So we've got a lot of really cool motion going on here, but let's make this a little more complicated. Open up the scene editor. I'm going to select my root, and I'm going to clone the entire thing. Now I have 2 of them. They're in the exact same place, but so you can't really see that, but I have 2 of them. I'm going to take my root. I'm going to delete the second root's animation. Not the rotation, just the root. So let's delete all that animation. Okay. Now all the way back here at frame 0, parent in place is on. I'm gonna make that second root parented to the first root. And then I'm gonna offset it. Move it back a little. This is, again, I'm doing completely arbitrary. I'm even gonna scale it down. And then when you animate them, they're now orbiting, sort of orbiting around each other. It's a little too far off the axis. Let me get a couple different views up here just so I can get a better handle on the action. So there you go. You know what I did wrong? This is my mistake. Pilot error. I parented it to the root. I want to parent it to the spinner. This is where it'll get interesting. There we go. Now we have orbits orbiting orbits. See how the secondary, smaller streamer I've created is now orbiting the orbit of the first streamer just because I parented them together. All that motion carries over even after parenting, and now you get this really crazy animation that looks really complicated, like, oh my god, that must have taken forever to do. No, I don't know how long I've been up here, a few minutes. It's pretty high rent. This is the kind of stuff you can show to a client and be like, I was up so late for you, and I'm charging you an hour of OT, and they're just like, wow, that's amazing looking, so okay. It might not go exactly like that. One of the other things I did in the first one, in the render I showed you earlier, is I added glow. So let's do that. Just enable glow. The intensity of the glow will be 50%. You know what? That's not the tool I want to use. Let's add bloom. That's more fun. Bloom says that whenever the brightness of any given pixel gets over 95%, I'm going to add a 25 pixel bloom with a strength of 50%. So any of our brightnesses that gets over a certain brightness will now bloom. Thus the name of the tool. That didn't need that much explanation, I suspect. I got to remember my audience. I'm at Siggraph. I'm not at the RV show. Let's go back to the surface editor because I want to make sure something pops. I'm going to add a big white highlight right in the middle. Let's take this, sneak another node into our gradient here, and just make that 100%. A trick, if anyone here uses Lightwave, a nice trick that I think might be on document, it's really cool. Right-click and drag here, and you can control the luminance value of all the values at once. So, I think that's neat.
Now, we can't hear her from over for this article that she did on spatial animation on IEEE Spectrum magazine.
There you go. Look at that. Nice bright glow at the front end. Nice dramatic slopes on the sides. It trails off. Don't look too far that way or I'll get the microphone feedback thing going on. And render it here and we can see that we are trailing off to 0. Zero opacity at the tails. So that is that's the streamers tutorial. I was I can blow something up too if I've got a few more minutes here. So this is the Streamers tutorial. It's a lot of fun. It's a pretty simple trick that comes out with some really cool effects, and I won't be able to sell it to anyone again because they're going to post what I just told all of you on the internet next week.